If you like Psych with Mike, here's a couple of ways that you could really help us out. You could subscribe to the show on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at Psych with Mike. But the two things that would really, really help us out is subscribing to us on YouTube, search Psych with Mike, but also going to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a review and a comment. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan. I am here on a beautiful Friday morning with my friend and colleague, Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Happy to be here, and I'm happy to have an opportunity to recognize that we're not only here, we're around the whole blooming world.
How can that be?
The internet.
Amazing
the
internet
for communication.
Al Gore is such a great guy.
You know, he did more for the world than he knew.
Yes, he did.
No, I mention that because we received an extensive and very nice letter from a lady named Sarah Walters who lives in Australia, who found our podcast and became enamored of them and literally has watched every episode. And then she took the time to write us a critique of her understanding of our personalities and the way we approach things, and her disappointment when we veered into fluffy, light political stuff, and her desire that we stay more focused on clinical concepts. And Sarah, we love getting letters like that, and we really appreciate that you made the effort and took the time, and we are fascinated by the fact that here in St. Louis, Missouri, living a day-to-day life, we don't really think about ourselves being heard or thought about or considered in other countries. But we get letters, lots and lots of letters in the mailbag from people all over the world. And it's such a gratifying thing when somebody such as yourself takes the time to write to us about your reaction.
It
So
really
thank
is.
you.
And when people say, and Sarah said this, and I really appreciate it, that they found what we do so beneficial that they actually went back and listened to all of the episodes. The first thing I think of is we've got 140 episodes. That's like a 70-hour time sink.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, somebody thought that what we do is valuable enough to them that they would literally commit 70 hours of their life to going back and listening to the program. I cannot express how flattered I am.
Well, my thought would be that she didn't start out committing 70 hours of her life. My thought was she thought, well, I'll listen to another one to see if it's any good.
Yeah.
And continued to do so. Then she realized, well, I've gone through the whole kit and caboodle. So
Right.
It's time to react.
Right. But still at the end, it was.
So make your voice heard. You have that opportunity. Get in touch with us. Reach out to us
absolutely.
about topics, about reactions, about observations, about needs. I mean, we're happy to respond.
And
you can reach us at
psychwithmike.com.
There you go.
And to just kind of put a fine point on that, she did make some suggestions, which we have in our queue, and so she can be assured that some of the topics that she suggested are going to be covered in the coming weeks, and we really appreciate that.
However well or poorly.
Well, because, if a client came into our offices and said, this is what I want to work on, I want to work on my self-esteem, we wouldn't try and fix their marriage. Right? We would do what it was that they wanted. And so we want to...
Well, because neither one of us perceives ourselves as an agenda therapist.
Well...
I don't have a predefined agenda.
So you're saying there might be some therapists that might do that?
There are.
Yeah.
There absolutely are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would be responsive, and so we want to be that way on the show, too. If people have things that, even if it's just something that they're struggling with, we would like to be able to be responsive if they would like to hear something specific.
All right.
One of the things that I find difficult, though, and one of the things that I hear a lot of times in therapy is that people don't get, like, if Sarah had written us this letter and neither one of us had ever responded
Acknowledged
to it.
it.
Yeah. And she never heard any of her topics ever covered on the future shows, then she would be left wondering, did they get my letter? Did they not get it? If they got it, was it not good? Were they offended? And people have those
or
questions.
she'd be getting angry, frustrated.
Yeah. And so then they come to therapy and they say, oh, this thing happened to me and I need what?
Feedback,
Or
response, reaction.
closure.
Never get it right.
So,
See, closure goes to the end point. I think they want the dance. I think they want the dialogue.
well,
they want the
but that's why, so I had sent you an article
Yeah.
on this idea of closure, and the reason is because
quickly reviewing it here as you speak.
on your internet connected device.
Yeah.
Thank you, Al Gore. And people who don't get that joke, it's fine. If you do get it, yay, you're old. But
You're of a certain age.
right,
Yeah.
right. But people come to therapy and they say, this thing happened and I need closure. And I've been really thinking about that because it occurs to me that the understanding that we have of closure, both in the lay population, but I think also professionally, is wrong.
I would agree.
Yeah. If you look closure up in the dictionary, it says seeking answers. And that even in the article it said, who was the guy that...
I don't know what you're...
Oh, R.E. Kruglansky is the first person who...
Sociologist came up with the term?
Yeah. In the 1990s. So this idea of closure has only been around since the 1990s, although I suspect the idea has been around for a lot longer, but the use of the phrase.
Yeah.
But if you look closure up in the dictionary, it talks about finding answers. And in this article, that's what they talk about is if you are in a relationship and somebody just changes their Facebook status and then won't ever talk to you, and now you're devastated because you don't know what happened, that this person is seeking answers. And my trouble with that is, what if those answers are unobtainable?
And what if they are in radical disagreement with your worldview?
Exactly.
And you can't digest it. You can't accept it. It doesn't match reality in any way. At the end of the day, you still have to put one foot in front of the next and go forward. And you have to define your reality and your understanding, and you have to process and put it wherever you need to put it, so that it doesn't cripple you.
This is bad radio, but I unplugged my headphones, so I had to just plug them in. That's what I was doing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm good.
I thought you were wondering what I was doing.
Never.
But yeah, and so, but in the example of if you have a bad relationship with a parent and that parent passes away, can you ever get closure? Because you can't go back and ask that parent what happened in your relationship that caused it to be the way that it is.
Well, if a relationship is sundered, then you, and I assume the other party as well, need to move forward on a new path.
Mm-hmm.
And if you engage with that party over who shot John, why did this happen, when did this happen, I didn't mean that, you didn't mean that, we didn't say that, we could, if only I'd known, you don't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
You just keep chasing your tail like a dog. I think it's a healthier response if you're able to say, okay, it's sundered, now we're not a we, I'm an I, and I need to move forward. I need to figure out who I am without this as part of my life, as part of my identity.
And so the example that the article uses, which is you're in this relationship, somebody changes their Facebook status, then won't contact you. I'm, like, okay, that.
Yeah, my
I wonder why
reaction is
people would
there
be,
is no one on Facebook that's important to me.
Yeah, well, to us, but I know that some people are very connected to their social media. But if somebody breaks up with you,
it's a fantasy.
Yeah, if somebody breaks up with you, and I'm not discounting anybody's reality, but if somebody breaks up with you over Facebook and then ghosts you, won't talk to you on social media anymore, then I don't know how great that relationship was to begin with. But I don't want to necessarily discount again anybody's reaction. But I think that we build these things up. I think that professionally, we are taking away the responsibility of the individual to right their own ship. When we talk about this idea of closure, like you need someone else to validate your understanding of the end of whatever this is so that you can move forward with your life. And I don't think that's required.
Like tough love. We give advice, or we have discussions with parents who are dealing with recalcitrant adolescents. And sometimes we talk to them about the concept of tough love. Your child is going to make mistakes in life. You need to build a box around them where they can make mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
Right.
But in order for that to happen, they have to experience consequences. If they don't feel the consequence, they're not going to learn, they're not going to change. So you have to let bad things happen to them sometimes. Life is the same way. And when you're talking about an invested, committed relationship that becomes sundered, then each party has to find a way forward, and the only way they're going to find it is get in touch with the pain of losing it. And if they micro-examine every nuance of how did this go wrong, they're pouring huge amounts of energy into a fire that's already burned out. So if in therapy, I think you help them better by saying, okay, let's fantasize for a minute that this person is gone and you're not ever going to learn why. So where does that leave you?
Right.
What do you need to do? What needs closure for you? How do we move forward for you? How do we open another door or window for you? It may be that the person died and you can't talk to him anymore.
Right.
You can't ask them, Daddy, why did this happen in my childhood? Why did you do this? Because they're gone. So you can say, that hurt, that frightened, that saddened, that caused me all this emotional baggage. Okay, now I can't get an answer from you and I can't change the past. How do I go forward without the negative impact of the baggage? I can't say it didn't happen. I can't unremember it, but I can choose to go forward in other ways. Somebody help me find a road. Somebody help me find a path. And that's what therapy's for.
And the way that this all started for me was that I had a client in the office and we were talking about this idea of closure. And he was saying, this happened and I can't understand it and I can't let go of it and I need closure.
Let go of it.
And then that's when it hit me and I said to him,
Just
closure isn't about finding answers.
Right.
It's about letting it go.
Right.
That's what closure is. And so when we tell people, okay, closure is about finding answers, I think we're doing a disservice to them because I think that externalizes the process. Like you can find the answer outside of you when in reality the answer can only come from within you.
I had a personal experience with this. I was married when I was younger to a different woman.
To me?
For 18 years. She came home one day and said, don't love you anymore, love somebody else, I'm getting a divorce. And I fell apart and I said, what happened? Can we talk about how can we fix this? Is this solvable? And she did what I thought was the meanest thing possible to do, but I now think was probably the healthiest thing for both of us. She said, I can't help you process this. I won't discuss it with you. You need to hear me. I am gone. Deal with it. And I thought, you cruel, dirty person, you. But it was probably the best. She could have strung me out for years of ongoing fights about who shot John and when did they do it. And instead, I had to create my own reality. I had to move forward. I had to heal my severance pain and stand on 2 feet and say, life is still here. I'm still here. Take a step forward.
Right.
So I wasn't staring into my navel, and she was not defining my reality by feeding me a script that she could have fed me. So I'm very grateful for that.
Right. And so the answers have to come from within the individual.
Yeah.
And so if you do get broken up with on Facebook and then ghosted, then the goal
Every time
isn't...
you say that, I have to laugh. The whole Facebook example is so bland to me because it's so stupid.
Okay, but we're two old white guys, and it is a very relevant part of a large population's experience.
Yeah. It's not reality.
And even though we don't connect with it.
If we're a reality therapist, don't we have to deal with reality?
But for individuals, we grew up, you even more than me, I grew up in a time before we had a TV.
Back in the Conestoga wagon
Yeah.
days when I was heading west and fighting the Indians.
But people who have been born into the age of the internet, they're very connected to these things and they matter to them. And so I don't think it's fair to reject that reality just because we don't connect to it. But I also don't know that I think that it is effective or healthy for a person to put as much emphasis on that as some people do.
I agree.
Like I'm saying, if you get broken up with on the Facebook and this person then ghosts you, won't respond to you on social media, I'm not sure how good that relationship was to begin with. But that's not for me to judge. What I will say to them as a client is, even if this person won't talk to you, the answers that are required for you to be able to move on don't come from them anyway. They come from inside of you. So what do you need to be able to let go of this? Okay, let's take our break and we'll come back in just a second.
One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
That's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional,
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. Now, in addition to this idea of the answers have to come from within the person has to be willing to find the answers.
Well, and I think it's a misnomer or a delusion to hang your hat on the hook of closure. We're never going to get closure. Closure, if it occurs because internally we have rewritten a script.
Yeah.
And we have moved
Right.
away from the sore spot. If we're not able to do that, then we stay in that spot and we don't have closure, and our life is contaminated by all those negative, sad, painful feelings that become distortions in our ability to function. And if we're that distorted in our ability to function, we're not going to make new relationships. We're not going to replace what we had with something healthier or better or more satisfying. So closure, and especially in the case of death, where you don't have any direct way to communicate with that person anymore and get communications back. So you're shouting into a vacuum. You're crying into a vacuum. At some point, you have to close the door on the vacuum. You have to. So the closure to me is when you can close the door. Not that everything is resolved.
Exactly.
It's abandoned.
I
give that up.
Closing the door,
Yeah.
not getting the answers.
Yes.
But you know, the truth is, whether the person dies or they just ghost you on social media, you aren't going to get answers from that person, even if that person were to talk to you. How do you know that what they're saying to you is the truth?
Well, that's why my son, when he was younger, was playing video games one evening, and I was fussing him about, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm playing this game with my friend in Germany. And I said, you don't have any friends in Germany. You've never been to Germany. You don't speak German. You're not even able to know if that person who said they're from Germany is in Germany. And he was really distraught because he had this identity of who this person was scripted in his head.
Yeah.
And that, you know,
He
the
thought
police
of himself
department
as a globetrotter.
The police departments find all these old perverts that are hanging out in chat rooms saying they're 13-year-old teenagers and want to have, whatever with each other. And then they set them up for meetings, and it turns out to be a 60-year-old pervert. You don't know.
You don't know, but then some of those people are legitimate people from other countries, and it does tend to broaden the adolescents' horizons if they are having connections with these multicultural.
Which reminds me that we just spoke to Sarah about being in Australia and White Dustin. And maybe she was in Tennessee.
maybe it was Sam. I know.
Who knows, exactly.
Right. But I just became aware that we're not aware, but I met you when I was 30 years old, when I was in graduate school.
Yeah.
And I'm 57, so that means I've known you for 27 years. So in a couple of years, I will have known you for half of my life.
That's frightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I hope I'm still here for that.
That's weird.
Yeah.
But 27 years ago, you said something that I'm going to repeat that profoundly had an impact on me.
Yeah. And it made you angry.
No. You were talking about exactly this idea, and I don't know that you were using the terminology of closure, but you were talking about, people letting stuff go, and you were saying that when people come into your office and you tell them, think about your garbage. You don't go out in your garage and dump your trash can out and rub the garbage all over you and smell the garbage and roll around in the garbage. You put the lid on the trash can and you take it to the end of the driveway. Get rid of your trash.
Yeah.
Let it go. And that had a really profound impact on me, and is actually an image that I get in my brain when I talk to clients and I hear them doing this. They're wallowing in that self-pity, which people do and I have done, but the goal is take the garbage to the curb.
I've learned to be more concise in my descriptors now, and what I will regularly say to people. Imagine you have a dog, and the dog goes out in the backyard and poops in the backyard, and lays there in the sun and crusts over, solidifies. And then you go out and you kick it. And if you kick it, then it's going to pop it open, and you're getting all that smell again, and you may have a mess on your foot. And so I tell my clients, you're kicking the dog poop. You need to quit kicking the poop, because every time you kick it, you re-energize all that negative process that you're going to have to experience.
Right. So
it's the same thing.
Yeah. So the goal is to get rid of the poop.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
or don't kick it. Just walk around it, leave it there till it rots, but leave it alone.
I gotcha. Huh. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
I had a lot of clients, and I know a lot of people who aren't clients, who are trapped in these places where it's like having a loose tooth that you just keep wiggling with your tongue, and you get a pain shot, and then you wait and you wiggle it again, You got to quit doing that. Either leave it alone and let it re-solidify, or pull the tooth. But you got to quit wiggling the tooth.
Right.
You got to quit kicking the dog turd.
So you're saying that if you, and obviously there are different gradients of loss.
Well, yeah.
But that if the person breaks up with you on the internet and then ghosts you, if you just don't kick it, then eventually that will just be okay.
Life will intrude.
So
other things will come up.
So you don't have to invest energy in trying to resolve the interpersonal conflict.
No, the only positive outcome for investing energy is for self-reflection.
Yeah.
Am I informed by this experience about myself in a way that's useful? Can I say, maybe if I spoke more gently, maybe if I was more affectionate, maybe if I laughed more often, I wouldn't have this effect on people. So I can experiment with that. I can try to speak more gently. I can try to laugh more often, and I see if I get changes in the way people respond to me. But that's all self-directed, self-analysis, is not the other. How many times in a therapy setting have you spent trying to say, we can't change Bob or Tom or Harry, we can only change you. So let's don't spend our time trying to figure out, why did Bob behave this way? Why did Tom say that? Why did Harry do that? Let's talk about you, what you can now do, given that they did say that and do that.
Right.
So where does that leave you?
Yeah. So okay. So the my reflection to that would be this: that I totally would be okay with somebody leaving it alone, as long as it wasn't a negative sink on their own confidence and self-esteem. Right. So if the person breaks up with them and the paradigm that they have, the narrative that they have erected for themselves is, I was a horrible partner, then I would probably still want to work on that, because I wouldn't want them walking away with that being
Well, you go back to our
the final determination.
Our last podcast, we were talking about Albert Ellis and rational motive therapy. And if I had the belief coming out of a broken marriage that I had no friends, but my ex-wife had friends, and they just tolerated me as a courtesy to her, then Ellis would say, reality test that. You know, define friend, who's in your environment. Can you honestly, objectively find data that says you have no friends? And if the answer is yes, you can honestly and objectively find data that says you have no friends, then how do you change your behavior so that you can become friend worthy?
Right.
But if the answer is, well, I do have some friends, then you have to go back and reaffirm your conclusion.
Okay, so what you're saying is you could create closure by drawing the conclusion that you were a bad partner, and then we would then go through and
How can I
reality
become
test
more
that. That would be a
partner-worthy with
different
somebody?
process. So you could still have the closure, but you would then work on the irrational belief as a separate process.
The closure comes
I
from
got you.
within
I got you.
you, not as a gift
when
from
the person
somebody else.
says, "I'm done with it."
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you have to accept that. Okay, they're done with it. Now I have to move on. And I want to look at it not from kicking the dog poop perspective of beating it to death, but from saying, is there something here, message-wise, that has value for me that I can use to grow and be different? Should I want to be different? Should I need to be different? But
Right.
I have to make that determination.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take her interpretation of reality. She left. She's out of the picture. Now I have to.
And we don't even know what her interpretation of reality is.
No, she wouldn't give it to me.
She wouldn't give it to us. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm at peace with that now, but it took a while.
right, but we're projecting onto her anything that any conclusions that you drew about yourself were projections, because she wasn't giving you that information.
No, my feedback wasn't coming from her, it was
Yeah.
coming from others in my environment.
Right.
I had other people say, well, wait a minute, I'm your friend. I'll be your friend.
Yeah.
Come go to dinner with me. Us. And then reality said, well, perhaps I have the wrong conclusion here. And I had the opportunity to say, maybe I could go make more friends. How would I do that? So, but that's all process that happens inside me. That doesn't come from letting someone else define my reality. So if somebody ghosts you on the internet,
Right.
let them go.
Right.
They're not real.
Right. And closure comes from when you are willing to accept.
Right. And move forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what closure is the acceptance
Yeah.
of the truth of your current situation. Your acceptance, I am no longer in a relationship with this person, and it doesn't really matter.
My father
why.
is dead. I'm not going to talk to him ever again.
Right.
But I talk to my image of who he was, and I have a one-sided conversation, but I know it's a one-sided conversation.
And in the end, the only thing that you can ever do is accept the reality of whatever your relationship with him was when he was alive.
Well, I'll give you a more interesting one. My mother was married to a man that died. And I was talking to her about it shortly after he died. And she said for the first 4 nights after his death, that she would wake up in the middle of the night and he would be laying in bed with her, dressed in his funeral suit that she'd buried him in. And they would talk about the children and the farm and the problems that needed to be resolved about the farm. And after 4 nights of those discussions, he said, I'm done here. I won't be back. And she never saw him again. Now, she believes that was real, that really happened. I don't. I think that was a construct
of her self-conscious.
her monologue of having been married to him and having these issues in their lives that needed to still existed and needed to be resolved, and her efforts to try to put all that together in a way that was useful to her for decision making. But the point to me is, it doesn't matter whether it was real or not.
Right.
It matters that she found useful ways to step forward.
And when he said, "I'm
won't
done
be back,"
and I won't be back," then she could accept that.
and say, now it's on me.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can pull the trigger on these decisions that we discussed
And
in
she
whatever
might
way I choose.
not have been able to do that as effectively 4 days earlier. And so whether it was a real phenomenon
Yeah.
that happened or just a projection of her unconscious, it doesn't matter. That was how she was able to get to acceptance. And so I really try in therapy to avoid using the word closure and just use the word acceptance, because I think it's a much more elucidating term.
Words have power.
Yeah.
Words have meaning.
Yeah. And closure feels like to me that it is outward focused, externally focused, and acceptance feels like to me that it's inward focused.
I would, with that interpretation of it, I would say closure involves handing your reality to someone else for definition. Mm-hmm. You have to define it for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do you have any parting words for Sarah?
Thank you for writing to us. Thank you for taking time to listen to us, even if you are in Tennessee.
That's a powerful message. And thank you, Sarah. We really, really, really appreciate it. And we hope that you will be a friend of the show and stay in contact, as we hope that anybody who wants to send us a message would do. Right now, the load that we have is manageable. So we try and respond to every message that we receive. Obviously, if we got to the level of...
If we don't respond to you,
it
listen
isn't
to this
because
podcast
we don't
again
like
and
you.
give yourself closure.
That's right. All of the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. If you do want to get a hold of us, the best way to do that is through the psychwithmike.com website. But you can also find us on YouTube at Psych with Mike, on Twitter at Psych with Mike, or on Facebook at Psych with Mike. And you can also get a hold of us through any of those means as well. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.